Hello and welcome to the Duct Tapes podcast. My name is Raza Mohsin, and on this podcast we talk about all the aspects of design and the business of design in Pakistan. आज की इस पहली एपिसोड में हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं अरसलान खत्री, who is a very active member of the design community in Pakistan. He has worked as a product designer for Venture Dive and Careem. More recently, he has been the head of design at Bazaar. आजकल वो इंडस वैली स्कूल ऑफ आर्ट्स एंड आर्किटेक्चर में डिज़ाइन पढ़ाते हैं और इंडिपेंडेंट डिज़ाइन कंसल्टेंट के तौर पर काम कर रहे हैं। सबसे पहले तो वेलकम अरसलान, थैंक यू फॉर बीइंग पार्ट ऑफ दिस एपिसोड। आपके इंट्रोडक्शन से शुरू करते हैं। टेल अस अ बिट अबाउट योरसेल्फ।
Assalamualaikum Raza, thanks for this invitation. I think ये मेरे लिए भी पहली दफ़ा ही है इस टाइप का. So I'll try to keep it short. Uh, I graduated in 2014 Zabist कराची से. मीडिया साइंसेस का बैकग्राउंड है और मीडिया का यूजुअली उस टाइम पे भी और आई थिंक अभी भी यही कहते हैं कि जिसका कुछ नहीं होता उसका मीडिया होता है. एंड द होल आइडिया फ्रॉम दैट फ्रेज वाज के मीडिया ने बहुत सारे कोर्सेज पढ़ाते हैं एंड आई थिंक द होल आइडिया आई थिंक मेरे लिए अच्छी बात ये थी दैट बहुत सारे फ्लेवर्स मिल गए थे. सो वी वर टॉट advertising strategy, film production, filmmaking, music production, journalism, and a lot of others. जो एक एक दो दो कोर्स करके eventually sort of made up that degree. So उससे उससे फ़ायदा ये हुआ कि बहुत ड्यूरिंग these 4 years ये पता चल गया कि यार अच्छा इंटरेस्ट किस चीज़ में है एटलीस्ट. मतलब वो कन्विक्शन नहीं था. आई थिंक जैसे यूजुअली आर्ट स्कूल्स के अंदर या डिज़ाइन प्रोग्राम्स के अंदर होता है वो ये होता है कि आपकी एक स्पेशलिटी बन जाती है बाय द टाइम यू ग्रेजुएट. सो दैट डिडंट हैपन. आई थिंक मीडिया के अंदर भी इट वाजंट लाइक अ प्लान डिसीजन. सो दैबिस का मीडिया इज़ नॉट अ डिज़ाइन प्रोग्राम.
ओके।
उसके अंदर एक कम्युनिकेशन डिज़ाइन था बट बाय द टाइम आई गॉट इन वो भी हटा दिया था एज अ मेजर. So there
ओके।
was practically no design major, and that was not the whole idea. Even though intention ये थी कि यार अच्छा डिज़ाइन का इंटरेस्ट है and I think वो भाई का एक जानने वाला था who had recommended this program and sort of that was the entry. फॉर्मल जो आई वुड से जो सबसे सबसे रेलेवेंट डिज़ाइन के बारे में सीखना या टेक के बारे में सीखना हैज़ बिन मोर ऑन द जॉब along with कोर्सेज. कोर्सेरा पे हो गया या अगेन आर्टिकल से देख लिया, लोगों ने जहाँ लिखी हुई चीज़ें हैं वो पढ़ ली. a lot has been scavenged throughout the years. एंड ऐसा ही है. आई थिंक जो जहाँ जितना पता भी चल रहा है वो भी ये पता चल रहा है दैट it's very similar. All you have to do is that keep on learning. तो आई थिंक वो ही चल रहा होता है. देयर इजंट एनी वन बुक कि आप जैसे होता था ना कि आपके पास पास पेपर्स या कुछ होते हैं. देयर इज अ सेट पैटर्न which you can follow and then you'll be great. So I think that's
ओके,
that's
नाइस।
that
दैट्स इंटरेस्टिंग।
that's the background I would say.
ओके। तो बट लाइक देयर मस्ट हैव बीन सम पॉइंट ना, किसी पॉइंट पे आपको रियलाइज हुआ कि अच्छा देयर इज अ फील्ड कॉल्ड यूएक्स डिज़ाइन, या आप लाइक यू स्टम्बल्ड अपॉन इट, या आप कई दफ़ा ये होता है कि जैसे सॉफ्टवेयर वालों का बहुत ज़्यादा लाइक डेव बैकग्राउंड जिनका है उनका होता है कि एचसीआई का हमने कोर्स लिया तो देन वी गॉट टू नो अबाउट इट। लाइक कोई एक वो सर्टेन मोमेंट होता है जिसमें आपको रियलाइज होता है कि अच्छा ये फील्ड है इंटरेस्टिंग, इसे एक्सप्लोर करके देखते हैं। आई गेस कि आपने वो काफ़ी सारे कोर्सेज लिए, देयर वाज लाइक अ लॉट ऑफ वो बुफे की तरह एक हो गया कि यू गॉट टू टेस्ट अ लॉट ऑफ डिफरेंट थिंग्स, बट लाइक वाज देयर अ सर्टेन पॉइंट जिसमें आपको रियलाइज हुआ कि लाइक दिस, या फिर वाज इट एन ऑनगोइंग थिंग कि विद टाइम, विद जॉब, विद लाइक विद लर्निंग मे बी you switch to product and UX?
It's relatively very clear. So जब
Hmm.
जब से ग्रेजुएट हुए थे ना, so typical career path for advertising strategy. So मेरा majors was ad strategy और थोड़े से design, and दूसरा
Hmm.
major generally is film production जिसमें मेरा minor
Hmm.
था. So
Hmm.
typical career path जो होती है ना वो ad agencies की होती है और ad agency आप join करते हो जिसके
Ah,
अंदर you start from an associate all the way to a creative director or ACD or whatever. हुआ ये
okay,
that
nice.
that is how it started even for me. और
अच्छा।
JWT join कर ली which was an ad agency. um, तकरीबन around the 6 month 8 month mark ये तो समझ में आ गया कि यार अच्छा this isn't working. Interest wise
Hmm.
it seems to be के contribution है but it's not really going somewhere at least from my perspective or what I had in mind. ये पता था फ्रॉम एंड अगेन दिस इज 2014 और 2015 की बात कर रहा हूँ, राइट? सो द होल आइडिया
हुँ,
एट द टाइम वाज कि यू वुड हैव डिजाइन एंड देन व्हाट यू वुड हैव इज
हुँ,
प्रोबेबली वेब डिजाइन या यूआई यूएक्स डिजाइन। एंड आई थिंक ये पता था
राइट।
कि यार अच्छा ये दो फील्ड्स हैं। सो
हुँ, हुँ,
ग्राफिक वाली साइड या विजुअल डिजाइन इज समथिंग जो अभी चल रही थी, एंड आई हैड सॉर्ट ऑफ एन आइडिया कि यार अच्छा यही है। So उस टाइम पे आई गॉट एन अपॉर्चुनिटी, जो वेंचर डे वाली अपॉर्चुनिटी थी, दैट वाज बेसिकली थ्रू अ रेफरल। देयर वाज दिस
ओके।
बैक एंड इंजीनियर, हमजा नाम था, who was a friend's friend, एंड उन्होंने बताया कि यार यूआई यूएक्स की अपॉर्चुनिटी है, एंड आई हैड रीच्ड आउट टू हिम लास्ट ईयर बिफोर ग्रेजुएटिंग एज वेल कि यार अच्छा, एंड अगेन इट वाज अगेन आस्किंग अराउंड कि यार अच्छा ये परसू कहाँ होती है, ये कोई कंपनियां हैं जो यूआई यूएक्स डिजाइनर रखते
हुँ,
हैं?
हुँ,
There
हुँ,
wasn't at all this demand of sorts, because वो people didn't know what to call it, या ये वाली like where does this part of
हाँ,
design belong,
मेक्स
like
सेंस।
you were saying, right? Computer track default था,
येस।
so from a design perspective this
हुँ,
was never the common thing. I think in
येस।
retrospect this was part of the front end engineering track जिसके अंदर you would have the UI
हुँ,
UX
हुँ,
engineer, और वो ही एक default path होती थी, until recently अब ये वाली चीज़ें थोड़ी change हुई हैं। So for me, the tipping point was this opportunity, and I think एक दफ़ा जब ये रोल के अंदर घुस गया, and then I was assigned to this client called Careem, और फिर करीम के अंदर जब काम करना शुरू
हुँ,
करा था, even as a service provider, वहाँ से बहुत चीज़ें पता चली
हुँ,
कि
हुँ,
यार अच्छा these are all the sorts of things I did not know. ये कहीं पढ़ाई भी नहीं गई और ये तो रेडार में भी नहीं है मेरी। So
हुँ,
that is what led to Coursera. That is what led to this interaction design specialization. So ये San Diego वाली जो specialization थी, the good thing was that it was a good platter. तो 7-8 courses थे जिसके अंदर they started from foundations. तो
हुँ, हुँ,
बेशक पूरा का पूरा रेलेवेंट नहीं था, बट उससे फ़ायदा
ओके,
ये
नाइस।
हुआ कि जो मैं जॉब पे कर रहा हूँ,
हुँ, हुँ,
दैट कॉम्प्लीमेंटेड व्हाट आई वाज़ लर्निंग।
हुँ, हुँ,
So there was a lot of overlap which sort
ज़बरदस्त।
of helped me practice a lot of the things which I was learning on the job. तो आई फील उससे काफ़ी चीज़ें फ़र्क पड़ी थी, एंड ऑब्वियसली देन मेंटरशिप कम्स इन। So I
हुँ,
had
हुँ,
Ali Raza Venture Dive पे, who was my design manager at the time, and then I had
ओह!
Mohammed Imran, जो
नाइस,
दुबई में मेरे मैनेजर थे फ्रॉम द करीम
ओके।
साइड ऑफ थिंग्स। तो आई थिंक इन लोगों को जितना मैंने तंग किया है, एंड टू दिस डे आई थिंक आई ओव इट टू अ लॉट ऑफ द
हाँ,
बॉदरिंग
हाँ।
ऑन देयर साइड्स के, इनका जितना मैंने दिमाग खाया है, आई थिंक
हुँ, हुँ,
दैट्स वेयर अ लॉट ऑफ द लर्निंग हैपेंड इन रियलिटी, बिकॉज़ वो था कि जो भी क्वेरी होती थी, आई वुड
हुँ, हुँ,
इंस्टेंटली हैव एट लीस्ट 1, 2 और 3 पीपल टू गो टू, दैट हे आई एम नॉट एबल टू सॉल्व दिस, लाइक व्हाट
हुँ,
डू आई
हुँ,
नीड टू लर्न, और ये कहाँ से पता चलता है, and
हुँ,
फिर पता चलता, and these
ज़बरदस्त।
consistent sort of iterative feedback was something which has been the change. I wouldn't say कोई एक चीज़ थी, but ये
हुँ, हुँ,
consistent sort of जो streams थी ना, they complemented each other, I think, over time.
राइट, राइट, राइट। अच्छा, अच्छा आई डिडन्ट नो अबाउट अली रज़ा। आई गेस जो इस्लामिक फाइंडर पे थे, राइट? बाद
जी।
में?
हाँ,
द
अली
सेम
अली
अली रज़ा,
अली now
राइट?
is
हाँ।
a hardcore product person.
हाँ, हाँ, हाँ,
लेकिन
बिल्कुल,
he's
बिल्कुल।
like he is one of the first managers, and he's a very very good friend. अभी मुलाकात करते हैं जब वो दुबई से कभी यहाँ आ रहे होते हैं तो। So
नाइस,
that's
नाइस।
like, हाँ,
Yeah, that's interesting because like मैं भी वेंचर डाइव पे जितना सारा आई वाज़ वर्किंग अंडर अली रज़ा,
so
तो सारा कुछ
we
बहुत
have
कुछ
another
उन्हीं
thing
उन्हीं
in
से सीखा।
common. Yes.
या तो बहुत ज़बरदस्त टाइम रहा उनके साथ और लाइक उन्होंने काफ़ी लाइक ही हेल्प्ड मी ग्रो अ लॉट। तो उन्हें भी खैर मैंने बहुत तंग किया है, तो दैट्स अ टॉपिक फॉर अनदर कन्वर्सेशन आई गेस।
Yes.
तो बट दैट्स लाइक गुड टू हियर। तो आई गेस लाइक उस टाइम पे द प्रोडक्ट स्पेस वाज़न्ट दैट एक्टिव लाइक एज़ फार एज़ आई नो क्योंकि मैं बहुत अरसे से तो शायद फॉलो नहीं कर रहा था बट लाइक जनरली हियरिंग अबाउट थिंग्स जिस टाइम की आप बात कर रहे हैं। आई गेस सर्विसेज़ मॉडल ज़्यादा थे बट लाइक यू गॉट fortunate in like starting working with Careem. तो how was your experience overall? I guess आप सर्विसेज मॉडल पे उस तरह से नहीं रहे, लाइक आपने प्रोडक्ट से ही लिया है स्टार्ट। तो कैसा रहा एक्सपीरियंस लाइक आई गेस यू वर्क देयर फॉर 3 इयर्स एट करीम?
हाँ, so करीम का टोटल टेन्योर वाज जस्ट अबाउट 5 इयर्स, जिसमें से
ओके,
पहले जो
नाइस।
10 महीने थे दैट वाज वाया वेंचर डाइव। before
ओके,
the
ओके, नाइस।
acqui-hire happened.
हुँ, हुँ,
और आप बिल्कुल सही कह रहे हैं कि वो टिपिकल जो सर्विसेज मॉडल है, I've been
हुँ,
exposed to it for a couple of months. Like before, for example, जब वेंचर ये करीम भी एक क्लाइंट था, उसके साथ भी 2-3 प्रोजेक्ट्स चल रहे होते थे एट अ लोअर
हुँ,
कमिटमेंट कैपेसिटी। बट आई कंप्लीटली अग्री कि वो जो टिपिकल एक्सपोजर होता है ना, जो स्टैंडर्ड एक्सपोजर होता
हुँ,
है, आई हैवंट रिसीव्ड दैट, एंड आई थिंक शायद उसकी वजह से भी काफ़ी बायस है मेरा, which sort of
ओके।
gets voiced out सारी conversation के अंदर. um,
हुँ,
I,
हुँ,
I think the major difference has been around कि यार कितना how much autonomy is the client giving to you, right? And I think that is one of
हुँ,
the
हुँ,
biggest differences between a client to a service provider model versus an
हुँ,
in-house sort of team वाला model. Because वहाँ आपका एक साइड पे on the services model, the expectation from you is output, right? And then
हुँ,
on the product side, it's usually outcome. And because it's the same umbrella, you're working on
हुँ,
this problem versus you're just delivering one output. So this is the major difference, right? And I think फिर उसके
यस,
अंदर भी
यस,
there
यस।
are there are good and bad examples of both, right? And that is something
हुँ,
with again maybe another topic for another day, but eventually
हुँ,
it builds down to the people you're working with, right? So
हाँ,
Kareem ke
या,
andar jab even when we were as part of Venture Dive, the relationship
हुँ,
between both of the entities was pretty transparent. So there was a lot of trust. Like for example, Imran ki side se he would still consider me part of the same team, right? So that
ओके,
never was a bottleneck. So he didn't shy away from sharing context, sharing
हुँ,
details. जहाँ वो वाले
हुँ,
conversation आती है ना कि यार अच्छा you're an outsider, you shouldn't have access to this. So I never
हुँ,
felt that,
हुँ,
and I think that is very important regardless of the relationship, right? Because
यस, यस,
if
यस।
we want to solve a problem, we have to understand the problem सही तरीके से. And a lot
हुँ,
of the times, this is where the bottleneck is, especially from a service providing lens, because आपको सिर्फ एक काम दिया गया होता है. तो जब तक आप वजह नहीं बताते, which I feel is at core what uh, what enables a designer to really do a good job. I think that is
हुँ,
where this gap occurs.
मेक सेंस, टोटली। सही, सही। नहीं, मेरा नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन एक्चुअली यही था, लाइक आई वांटेड दैट कंपैरिजन, क्योंकि हमारी स्पेस के अंदर ये बहुत ज़्यादा एक कन्वर्सेशन आई गेस लाइक हर जगह होती है, बट लाइक हमारा पाकिस्तान में भी एक है कि सर्विस वर्सेस प्रोडक्ट वाली। तो लाइक आई गेट योर जो आपने वो बात की ना कि टीम मैटर्स, लाइक बेसिकली आपकी ग्रोथ के अंदर, आपकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग के अंदर टीम मैटर्स मोर आई गेस। मॉडल तो अगेन वन कैन स्विच बिटवीन सर्विसेज और प्रोडक्ट। So, and then you moved on to Bazaar, right? So tell me about that. Wahan you were the head of design, right? So how did you, like, how was the experience? How, like, naturally uske andar you were in a leadership position. So how was that different from Careem generally? So tell me more about that.
Yes, so overall, so this is just to sort of set some context. This was peak COVID.
Hmm. हाँ.
I joined, I had joined in September, right? So अभी peak COVID चल रहा है, थोड़ी सी चीज़ें बेहतरी की तरफ लग रही हैं, but complete
Hmm.
lockdown, a lot of the things are still unknown. People are still afraid of what's going to happen.
Okay,
Yes,
you joined during the COVID, right? September of
yes,
like 2020.
बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल,
Oh,
बिल्कुल,
okay, okay. Very tough
बिल्कुल.
times. Okay.
हाँ, so अब हुआ भी ये था that there were absolutely no issues with Kareem, right? और जब मैं करीम के अंदर भी सारी टीम से बात करता था, including the co-founders, because वो obviously 5 year 5 years is a lot of time, right? तो वो
Hmm.
पता होता है कि यार अच्छा बेशक direct interaction ना हो, but people there was this tendency of people to know कि यार अच्छा there was this person in Karachi in the design team.
Hmm.
ट्रिप्स पे मुलाकातें होती थी whatever. um, so it was more this was more about what's good and versus what's better for me किस्म की conversation,
Hmm.
right? So I think one of the biggest challenges from my side, or the biggest thing which I wanted to achieve, was that can I build a design team in Karachi? That was
Hmm.
objective number one from my perspective. and then
Okay,
can I
interesting.
contribute to something beyond design, right?
Mhm,
So just taking a stab at both of these problem statements was something which was close. When Bazaar got into the conversation, and I think yeah, this is something which even exists to a certain extent today. Like if you're interested and if you're enthusiastic in the product design field, you would still
mhm,
wonder if there are enough options. And again, this is 2024 now, right?
mhm,
We still wonder कि यार अच्छा क्या हमारे पास हैं product companies या नहीं है, right? Especially now,
mhm,
looking at the macro जो मुल्क के हालात हैं, it just compounds a
mhm.
lot of these
Yeah,
problems and mindset. But the
yeah.
reality is that there are a lot of products, sure, but you have to do a
Mhm,
lot of homework before you agree कि यार अच्छा this is something which I want to pursue.
mhm,
बेशक within the capacity of joining a startup or within the capacity of joining them build something, right?
mhm.
So I think ये तो
Makes sense.
so Bazaar ka experience from that perspective, there was some commonality. So for example, one of the co-founders, Saad, I had worked with him in Careem. So
Okay.
from a mindset perspective, we both knew what we were getting into, like in
Mhm,
terms of expectation, in terms of how to go about certain things. There was
mhm,
commonality there. The good thing, the another good thing which I feel is has been a major differentiator is that
mhm,
is basically कि कौन सा co-founder या from the executive leadership, how many people are pro design in terms of कि यार अच्छा do they even have
yes.
radar, uh, do they have design at their radar in the first place, right? And it doesn't have
Mhm,
to be like a design organization or whatever, but basically, do they value experience where they're putting,
mhm,
they're able to allocate resources to it. And I think that has been a
mhm,
major, like at least from my side, I've observed this and especially from an ecosystem lens, it reflects. So over
mhm,
the years, what you would see is कि जहाँ जहाँ आपको design between the design की acceptance within the founding team or founders है, you would see that replicated in the design organization or in the broader
mhm.
organization, right?
Yes,
So I think
yes.
from that perspective, the experience of Bazaar, I think every 6 months there would be a different role needed. So ये 3 साल के अंदर
हाँ,
you can imagine there were like 3 to 4 different types of roles which I had played. Initially, it
हाँ,
was
nice.
just me. So a lot of it was again individual contribution primarily, and then
Mhm,
as time progressed, we sort of expanded. First, just product design, but brand design wali side ke andar we sort of expanded. And overall, I think the biggest learning has been the ability to just change and keeping up with not only the growth of the organization, but being aware of what's required at every step of the journey. I think that has been very,
mhm,
very important. And I think there's a lot of literature which cascades this point कि यार अच्छा, as startups progress, everyone in the organization has to be very mindful of hey, what is the next role which is required in this
mhm.
step of the journey. And I think that has been the biggest sort of motivator. Like you're not only
Nice.
rapidly growing, but it's also
Mhm.
categorical growth. And I think that has been very, very prominent in my perspective from my 3 years at least.
ज़बरदस्त। अच्छा, इसी से एक क्वेश्चन मेरे ज़हन में आ रहा है कि टॉकिंग अबाउट रोल्स लाइक एंड डिफरेंट रोल्स दैट यू हैड टू टेक ऑन ड्यूरिंग योर करियर, हाउ इम्पोर्टेंट आर टाइटल्स? लाइक हमारे यहाँ बिकॉज़ ऑफ लिंक्डइन एंड लाइक एवरीथिंग, बिकॉज़ आपने सेल्फ प्रमोशन करनी है, सारा कुछ है, तो टाइटल्स बहुत ज़्यादा चलते हैं कि आई एम अ सीनियर डैश डिज़ाइन, सीनियर प्रोडक्ट डिज़ाइनर, सीनियर यूएक्स डिज़ाइनर, UI UX designer, उसकी debate, like it's an ongoing debate. Just to get your take on it, do titles matter? How much do they matter?
Yeah, so
How much do
I
they
think
define your
so.
role?
I think 2021 की I think UX पाकिस्तान थी या 2020 की थी, जिसके अंदर I gave like a almost like a rant session on why titles don't matter. So I do have a hot take, and I do still believe that
Mm,
titles have some importance. उसके
mm,
एक functional value होती है, and I completely
yes.
agree with that. But उसके अलावा ना, इवेंचुअली ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में मैटर करता है कि यार अच्छा ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है कितनी बड़ी. So it's
हुँ,
subjective to the organization, right? So for
ओके।
example, one of the most common things which you'll see is, and I think a lot of people have written about it as well, क्योंकि पाकिस्तान के अंदर बड़ी product organizations नहीं है, so you
हुँ,
wouldn't see a lot of, let's say, directors of design, VPs of design, chief design
हुँ,
officers, and a lot of those things.
हुँ,
और
या
and that is completely okay. It is not expected कि हमारे पास इतनी अचानक से ये टाइटल्स आ जाएंगे. ठीक है.
हुँ,
तो फिर उसके बाद आप जो नेक्स्ट ईयर देख रहे हो ना, उसके बाद आपके पास लीड आता है, प्रिंसिपल आ जाता है मे बी, और हेड आ जाता है. So, my perspective on the head title is that it is relatively flexible. So इसके अंदर ना,
हुँ,
what I've at least found out, and again I continue, I'm because I'm very self aware of this. तो मुझे भी होता है कि यार अच्छा, I want to make sure that it's relevant, और ऐसा ना हो रहा हो कि ये it's exaggerated ना लगे in any capacity, right?
हुँ, हुँ,
So a
यस,
lot of it boils down to what is the team you're responsible for. Like, what is the configuration of the
हुँ,
team you're responsible for, right? So
हुँ,
usually head in certain organization, head के बाद director roles आते हैं, lot of
हुँ,
variety. So there is no one set, one thing sort of set, right? अब फिर
हुँ,
इसके बाद, and usually the identification there is that you need to have managers who are also looking after people. So basically, plus
हुँ,
ones, you have plus ones who then
हुँ,
have their reportees. That is like one sign.
हुँ, यस,
Up
ओके,
you position yourself in these shoes, that assumes that you at least have 3 to 5 people in the design team,
हुँ,
and then
यस,
उन 3 to 5 के अंदर भी there is a set exposure difference, जिसके अंदर ये experience
हुँ,
levels are really really doing justice to this, राइट.
यस,
अब इसके अंदर फिर दूसरा मसला आता है कि यार अच्छा, years of experience, जो आई थिंक ऑल्सो एड्स टू योर क्वेश्चन, क्या ये years of
यस, यस,
experience की
एग्ज़ैक्टली,
बला इसमें कहाँ आती है. बिकॉज अगर
एग्ज़ैक्टली,
हम टिपिकल पाथ देखें और हम कहते हैं कि
हुँ,
यार
हुँ,
10 साल से ये बंदा डिज़ाइन करता आ रहा है, तो क्या
हुँ, हुँ,
डिज़ाइन जो टिपिकल डेफिनेशन चल रही है, लेट्स से प्रोडक्ट डिज़ाइन और इवन यूआई डिज़ाइन, क्या वो
हुँ,
अभी तक वही चीज़ें हैं या क्या वो भी इवॉल्व हो गई हैं, right?
हुँ, हुँ,
So for example, in 2015, this was UI UX design, right? अब UI UX के अंदर मेरी assumption ये थी कि यार ये graphic design नहीं है, बस that was the core understanding which I had. This has to do with
हुँ,
interfaces. ये पता है कि यार ये application से related होंगी. So
हुँ, हुँ,
that was the whole idea. And the only reason why I think मुझे web design वो टाइटल अच्छा नहीं लग रहा था, बिकॉज़ वेब डिज़ाइन जस्ट
हुँ,
मेंट द वेब, सो इट वाज़ लिमिटिंग दैट वे.
हाँ,
So UI
ट्रू,
UX से
ट्रू,
ये था कि it
यस,
would involve some application, so that was what sort of was attractive at the time.
हुँ,
Over time, what has happened is that because knowledge uh, knowledge transfer बढ़ा है, because
हुँ, हुँ,
इधर demand and exposure, like you mentioned that venture dive हो गए, systems हो गए, a lot of these traditional organizations have also really helped in spreading the word, right? And
हुँ,
obviously
हुँ,
with on the startup ecosystem, with popular names coming in, with the Careem acquisition happening with Uber, so ये सारी चीजें have
बिल्कुल,
compounded this knowledge transfer, where at least ये
हुँ,
तो
हुँ,
पता चला है कि यार अच्छा, एक typical tech organization के अंदर you would have engineering, you would have product, and then you would have
हुँ, हुँ,
design. अब उसके अंदर क्या स्ट्रक्चर होता है, that isn't too significant in my opinion, at least, because what is important is that ये roles exist करते हैं, and as long as ये roles
हुँ,
exist करते हैं, you shouldn't worry too much about कि यार how is the org structured. So titles ना फिर यहाँ
हाँ,
घूम
ओके,
के आ जाते हैं कि यार अच्छा, for
बिल्कुल,
example, अब टाइटल्स का कोई मकसद नहीं है, इफ
हुँ,
उसकी जो एक्सपेक्टेड रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज है ना, आप वो अंजाम दे रहे हैं या
हुँ,
नहीं दे रहे हैं. So one of the biggest dilemmas
हाँ,
has been, you can call, for example, you can call yourself a product designer,
हुँ,
but
हुँ,
are you really working on business metrics with the product counterpart? That
हाँ,
has been one of the biggest questions, right? And ये सारे
यस,
there are a lot of times where you would see this, and you would also hear from hiring managers that this is one
हुँ,
of the
हुँ,
problems of not really being able to reflect what they're calling themselves, right? So if
हुँ,
you're
मेक्स सेंस,
pursuing UI, आप बेशक रहो, कोई मसला नहीं है. And again, this is
हुँ, हुँ,
growth journey, right? तो आप बेशक बताओ कि यार इस पे exposure नहीं है, these are all the things which I'm trying to learn to really fill this gap.
Mhm.
Or इसके अंदर there are a lot of good examples which you can pursue, right? So for example, you can be a UI designer or UX designer, and let's say you want to pursue product design. So आप ये कह सकते हो कि यार अच्छा, these are certain things which I am doing. मैंने अपना एक मिनी स्टार्टअप या साइड हसल एक शुरू की हुई है जिसको मैं प्रोडक्ट की तरह ट्रीट कर रहा हूँ,
Mhm.
and I'm taking feedback, building it myself,
हाँ,
and working as all of these three roles. And like this is one thing which I saw at
that's
Careem, where I was
mhm.
working with some of these counterparts, जिनका पोर्टफोलियो ये होता था. Like one of the biggest differences is that हमारी पोर्टफोलियो की एक्सपेक्टेशन जो एटलीस्ट हमें भी बताई
Mhm.
गई है, दैट हैज ऑलवेज बिन कि आपका डिज़ाइन का काम, right?
हाँ,
Whereas
बिल्कुल।
there were some of my peers who were from India, जो
Mhm.
दुबई की टीम में थे, और उनके portfolios were categorically different. अब जो भी
हुँ,
वजह होगी, but the reality is that
यस,
कोई you have to compete at an international scale, right? If we want
ट्रू,
to
ट्रू।
be top talent कह लो या number 1%,
हुँ,
या top percent talent कह लें, you have to realize कि यार अच्छा, what is the gap. So ये जो mindset है ना, that is something which I really encourage, especially on the junior side, to really pursue, because portfolio नहीं है, right? You can be a
हाँ,
great UI designer, आपकी dribble, this
हुँ,
muscle needs to be reflected. And I feel ये वाली
यस,
चीज़ is something where whoever has been able to do this already become top percent talent. And that is something
हाँ,
जो हमारे, if you can even revisit your circle, if you can think about names which you look up to, or upcoming
हुँ,
talent के अंदर, you know कि यार अच्छा, this person will be going places. I can almost guarantee you कि इस किस्म की दो तीन mindset changes होंगे उनके अंदर, which is their driving force. And I think I've seen this in many, even in locally as well. And I think that is
हाँ, बिल्कुल।
something which needs to scale, because opportunity
नहीं,
बहुत
ट्रू।
सारी है, मुश्किल बहुत होने वाला
हुँ,
है, and then you have to put in the work. So there is no other way to sort of build a portfolio than this, especially given how technology is evolving and the amount of access to tools is increasing, right? So
बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल।
yeah.
मतलब विजुअल साइड पे अब ऑब्वियसली जो बहुत बेसिक किस्म के टास्क थे वो तो अनकरीब एआई से रिजॉल्व होने लग जाएंगे। आई वाज हियरिंग अवैस इमरान पॉडकास्ट, तो उनकी जर्नी में भी मुझे लाइक व्हाट्स इंटरेस्टिंग इसके, क्योंकि खुद एक प्रोडक्ट के ऊपर काम किया, प्राइस के ऊपर काम किया। तो his experience also like added to that, but like having that side of like managing and overlooking everything like in his product, तो वो सर्टेनली वही आप वाली बात है कि वो मसल आपको स्ट्रेंथन करना पड़ता है। अदरवाइज आई गेस यूआई वाली साइड पे एक फोकस शायद इस वजह से भी हो गया कि द कोर्सेज, जनरली द कोर्सेज अवेलेबल ऑन यूट्यूब और मे बी ऑनलाइन जनरली जो अवेलेबल है, दे फोकस टू मच ऑन द यूआई साइड, बिकॉज लाइक यू हैव लाइक जस्ट स्टार्ट ऑन फिग्मा, आपने 4 स्क्रीन्स बनानी है और वो आपका पोर्टफोलियो रेडी है बाय द एंड ऑफ द मंथ। तो बट लाइक आई गेट व्हाट you're saying। तो यहाँ से like your transition from again being head of design at Bazaar and managing that team and like playing different roles and then like shifting to academia, that's interesting, like teaching कहाँ से बीच में आई, पहले से आपका इरादा था like, and how has been the experience at Indus Valley अभी तक?
हाँ, आई थिंक इट्स इम्पोर्टेंट टू क्लैरिफाई कि अभी टीचिंग हैज़, सो जब जब से बाज़ार शुरू हुआ था ना, बाज़ार के साथ साथ आई हैड स्टार्टेड टीचिंग इन इंडस
हम्म,
adjunct faculty के उसमें. So currently, I think teaching is still one of the things. I'm still pursuing certain clients who I'm helping them on the design org management and design facilitation side of things. So that is
हम्म,
important clarification one. Academia, I think full time shifting is something which at this point is very unlikely, at least for me, because I do feel
हाँ, ओके,
that I would love to help contribute to a lot of design organizations in some shape or form at
हम्म,
least. And that is something which
हम्म,
I think over time ये clear हो रहा है that we have to figure out some way where a lot of people can understand how design teams are built and why they are built.
हम्म,
I think a lot of it
हम्म,
is about education. So I think academia की motivation was very straightforward कि यार अच्छा, I see the gap in the market, and one of
हम्म,
my mentors, Sir Amir Mirza, and I think a lot of people might not be aware,
Mhm.
but he's the one who sort of brought me in to Indus, and he's been a mentor. He's more than a mentor at this
Okay.
point. So owe a lot to him.
Mhm.
सो उनसे जब कॉन्वर्जेशन होती थी ना चाय पे या कहीं भी, तो ये आई वुड
Mhm.
यूज आई वाज यूज्ड टू शेयरिंग स्टोरीज फ्रॉम करीम। आई वुड से कि यार अच्छा डिज़ाइनर हैं लेकिन डिज़ाइन से ये भी एक्सपेक्टेड है, दिस इज़ व्हाट वी आर ऑल एबल टू डू। एंड माय क्वेश्चन टू हिम वाज दैट हे व्हाई आरंट वी getting these courses taught at university level, हमें ये on the job एक
Mhm.
साल, and that is where this
Mhm.
conversation had started. And I think you can also relate to this कि a lot of what you're practicing right now, you would be wondering
Mhm.
कि यार अच्छा why has no one told us these things before, right? So
Mhm.
this is actually where the starting point was for teaching at Indus. And I think
Interesting.
eventually I think teaching product management was exactly that. So so what I tried to do was I tried to create this course around product management, which was focused on designers. So the whole idea was to teach
Mhm.
designers what to know outside of design as well. So I start the course by telling them it's an anti-design course. So you might be juniors in
Interesting.
university, but don't expect to
हाँ.
be treated like designers in this, right? So eventually,
Okay.
it's touching on business fundamentals. It's touching on the
Mhm.
basics of entrepreneurship. क्या चीज़ें आपको
Mhm.
पूछनी होती हैं, डिज़ाइन इसमें कहाँ इन्वॉल्व होता है, why design is not as
Mhm.
important as you think, and a lot of these things in between. So I think yeah, that has been the motivator for me to be able to really let designers know early on what else they should be able to
Mhm.
learn and practice and prepare themselves with, so that they don't end up making some of the mistakes which we've already made, right? And there is no sort of
हाँ.
going back, there's only looking forward. So we
बिल्कुल.
do know for a fact कि ये वाली चीज़ें will have higher deviance for whatever reason, right? So if you
Mhm.
know
True.
that there are certain things which demands us to change with time, it
Mhm.
would be almost unfair if we're not able to help others with it. And that's at least in a philosophical lens, that's where a lot of the things which I do outside of the corporate space come stem from. Like my view is कि
That's
यार
really.
आपको आप किसी ना किसी की तो मदद कर सकते हो in helping
Mhm.
their with their career or professional capacity के अंदर, so you should
Mhm.
pursue that in any capacity which you can.
That's wonderful. That sounds so wonderful. Uh, बिकॉज लाइक मुझे भी याद है कि इनिशियली व्हेन आई स्टार्टेड आउट इन डिज़ाइन तो वो प्रोडक्ट मैनेजर वाली चीज़, एंड आई वाज डिस्कसिंग दिस विद द फ्रेंड के इनिशियली हमारे जहन में बहुत ज़्यादा सेग्रीगेटेड एक वो होता था कि अच्छा ये बस डिज़ाइन का डिपार्टमेंट है, इसने डिज़ाइन करना है, मैनेजर जो है इज जस्ट देयर टू लाइक बॉदर यू और प्रेशराइज करना है, प्लानिंग उसका काम है, वो दैट्स अ सेपरेट थिंग, और डेव्स जो हैं वो लाइक दैट्स अनदर टीम, तो लाइक नॉट डिफरेंट थिंग, दैट्स लाइक पार्ट ऑफ वन थिंग अगेन के आपको कहीं न कहीं वो ओवरलैप ज़रूरी है अंडरस्टैंडिंग दोज़ डिपार्टमेंट्स। अ, सर आमिर जो हैं लाइक वाज़ ही योर टीचर एट ज़ेबिस्ट या क्यों, बिकॉज़ लाइक फॉर पीपल हू डोंट नो सर आमिर, कराची वाले तो आई गेस सारे डिज़ाइनर्स को पता होगा बिकॉज़ मेरी जितने डिज़ाइनर से बात होती है तो कहीं न कहीं देयर इज़ अ लिंक टू सर आमिर ना कि ही टॉट अ कोर्स और ही इंस्पायर्ड देम इन सम वे। But for people in Lahore, Islamabad and other places, कि Sir Amir is like one of the OGs of design, I guess, at least in teaching. So he's a very prominent personality. So you might be hearing more. Like we'll try to like set up a conversation with him as well. तो वो कहाँ से like how was he your teacher at Zabist?
So was lucky to have two courses being taught by him. The first one is typography, और उसके अंदर typography से ज़्यादा basics of visual design I also sort of learned और उनके through revise हो गए. So typography
हाँ.
की assignment होते थे, but it felt
हम्म.
like it's an opportunity to learn more about graphic design and the craft. The second course I
Nice.
think was Design for Social Change, where Zabis के अंदर ना total ये दो courses. There was this course Design for Social Change and
हम्म.
the product innovation. In
हम्म.
courses के अंदर there was a very early on signal on how to work in cross-functional teams. So Design for
Okay.
Social Change के अंदर we worked with NGOs and helped work. solve their problem. So
Mhm.
we worked with an education institution जो NGO थे, और उनकी एक branding हम
Mhm.
लोगों ने की थी as part of the sort of course, right? And then
Interesting.
Sir Amir ke saath, he was also my thesis advisor. So at the time, I think he was primarily teaching at KU, Karachi University. So we would
Mhm.
have a lot of our thesis sessions there as well, over chai. So
Okay.
that has been a consistent one. But yeah, he's been
That's
a
interesting.
teacher. We've worked on a couple of projects together as well since.
Mhm.
But yes, have been lucky to be taught by him. So yeah, and
Zabardast.
100%, I think
Zabardast.
you should definitely get him to speak and pick his brains. He's definitely a gold mine.
हम्म, बिल्कुल बिल्कुल नहीं, दैट्स ऑन द टू डू लिस्ट मेरे लिए। सो अच्छा, ओके, सो फॉर समबडी हुज एंटरिंग द डिज़ाइन फील्ड, लाइक अभी एक तो यू हैव बीन थ्रू द होल लाइक 10 ईयर प्रोसेस, आई गेस आपने यू हैव सीन द एवोल्यूशन एंड ग्रोथ ऑफ डिज़ाइन फील्ड इन पाकिस्तान। So for somebody who's like entering the field now, or who is switching from other fields, maybe like from dev से आ रहे हों, visual design से आ रहे हों, some people switch from psychology, yeah, other like areas. So what are your suggestions? What are your maybe guidelines for somebody entering the design field, product design field specifically? क्या चीज़ें, like what can be, what should they aim for? What should they look for?
Yeah, it's a good question, but it's also a very difficult question because it really depends on किसी का goal क्या होता है, right? Or with
Hmm.
something like product design, it fluctuates, or a lot of it
Hmm.
boils down to के कौन सी product किस space में वो product है और आप क्या करना चाहते हो. What do you feel about the
Hmm.
space, right? So
Okay.
I'll try to answer this question, but at the same time, it will still come in with certain assumptions. So may अभी तक
Hmm.
I'll give this answer based on the assumption कि आपको टेक में इंटरेस्ट है, आपको प्रोडक्ट डिज़ाइन को ही परस्यू करना है as a core.
Hmm.
You can have other interests, but you still want to pursue product design.
Hmm.
आपको कहीं ना कहीं कोई कोई चीज़ बनाने का इंटरेस्ट है, बेशक खुद बनाओ या किसी के साथ बनाओ, and
Hmm.
obviously you are still searching for certain answers. ऐसा नहीं है कि आपके पास कोई ना concrete. I think one thing which I've learned, at least even for myself, is that the answer changes. कोई ना कोई
Hmm.
चीज़ें mutual रहती हैं, but I think a good starting point has always been to think यार अच्छा, what are things which you would like to keep doing in 5 years? वो होता है ना, where do you see
Hmm.
yourself in 5 years? That question I
Hmm.
do not like, and I avoid it in interviews as well. A better question which I
Okay.
really think is क्या, what are some things which you would like to keep doing for 5 years or 10 years,
Hmm.
at least as a theme, ताकि at least ये clear हो जाए कि यार अच्छा, this is something which you're actually motivated to do
Hmm.
in reality. Yeah, so starting off, I think the biggest learning, or the biggest observation for me, is this ability to really know how to learn. कि आपकी जो absorb करने की capability है, that is also a
Hmm.
muscle, and that is also something which you can train yourself. How
Hmm.
to not only be curious, but how to really be resourceful. How to realize कि आपको ये नहीं पता, and these are the 5 things which you need to know to really understand this better, right? This can be as
Hmm.
basic as कि यार अच्छा, ये मुझे नहीं पता, इसके लिए मुझे ये चार चीज़ें समझने की ज़रूरत है, इन 4 चीज़ों को
Hmm.
समझने के लिए मुझे 15 चीज़ें समझने की ज़रूरत है, और ये 15 चीज़ें करने
Hmm.
के लिए मुझे 20 घंटे चाहिए. Being able to
बिल्कुल
really
सही।
quickly chart these plans for your own self
Hmm.
development, I think this is one of the biggest differentiators,
Hmm.
especially because of AI कह दें, या because of tech and how things are
Hmm.
evolving. You have to have this mindset where you're continuously evolving and working on your self development, because I think
Hmm.
this becomes a differentiator. Because ये चीज़ है ना, ये baseline है. This can help you in any part of the field or any
Hmm.
spectrum of life, वैसे at a philosophical tangent. Um, but then if you're starting off, if you're a junior, it has to be about your ability to create beautiful interfaces. And again, this will
Hmm.
this will look like a hot take, because ये eventually मैं generalize करके I'm just consolidating everything to a UI. but एक reality ये है that we have to understand that we're working with non-designers, and you have to
Mhm.
start in their territory, and you have to start explaining and talking about design where they understand design to start with.
Mm.
And one of the
Makes
easiest
sense.
starting points is visual design or the interface
Mm.
or the core visual experience of this. What I've seen
Mm.
a lot of juniors not do enough is that they want to work on strategy, they want to work on core experiences, they want to work on impact and a lot of those things, but they tend to forget that all of those things will take their natural course or thoda time lagta hai. You have to build this
Mhm.
trust, and the easiest way to build trust is to immediately help solve problems for your counterparts. So if that
Mm.
means you have to create a pretty looking slide deck for them, do it. If it means you have to create
Mm.
a kick-ass prototype for them, do it. If it means you have to just convert their wireframes into beautiful interfaces, do it. And
Mm.
initially this might look like यार ये मैं क्यों कर रहा हूँ या मैं सिर्फ
Mm.
सॉफ्टवेयर टूल ऑपरेटर हूँ और whatever, but in all
Mm.
of these conversation आपके पास यहाँ opportunity बनती है where you really reflect your brain onto them as well. जब आप उनको
Mm.
प्रेजेंट करते हो ना, you then give, if they've asked for just one thing or one design, you give them three, you give them five or whatever,
Mm.
where it showcases कि यार आपकी मोटिवेशन भी है, आप अपना दिमाग भी इस्तेमाल कर रहे हो और आप उसको पुश
Mm.
बैक भी दे रहे हो. आपने मांगा था, मैं आपको दे रहा हूँ, बट इफ यू वांट अ बेटर
Mm.
वर्जन, here is that, and this is why.
Mm.
So a lot of the times I see juniors not doing this, and they spend
Mm.
a lot of time trying to figure out ये bypass कैसे करना है, which I think is not a logical
हाँ.
strategy, because
True.
आपका hiring manager जो है वो बेशक designer होगा, but they're also
Mhm.
eventually building a case for you, right? So they have to
Yes, yes, yes.
know that you have your bases covered before they can also sort of push
Mm.
you forward. So I think यहाँ fundamentals is key, and fundamentals के अंदर it is essentially your curiosity कि यार अच्छा how interested are you in your own growth as well, और आप कितना
Mm.
मेहनत करते हो, just understanding कि यार अच्छा मुझे करना क्या है, कैसे करना है, right? Not being
Mm.
just passively waiting कोई आके मुझे बता देगा या मुझे कोर्स दे देगा, ये 15 things to work on as a designer किस्म की एक आर्टिकल दे देगा.
हाँ.
It's not going to be as straightforward as that, right? And then
Mm.
beyond the interface, I think really understanding that design is not just one field, and this is where I
Mm.
think I get a lot of heat as well. Yeah,
Mm.
design what special है ये और वो, and my argument is that design is just one of the many teams, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
And I think this is where juniors, I think उनकी गलती भी नहीं है, because that is something which historically or traditionally
Mm.
design schools के अंदर और design programs के अंदर especially, या एटलीस्ट कोर्स भी पढ़ रहे होते हो ना, उसके अंदर आपको ये
Mm.
नैरेटिव ये पिच हुआ हुआ होता है कि यार डिज़ाइन इज़ द वन चेंजिंग, आप ये कोर्स करके स्टीव जॉब्स बन जाओगे या व्हाटएवर, बट द
That's
रियलिटी
true.
इज़ दैट
That's
इट्स
true.
नॉट अ वन वन शॉट किस्म का सॉल्यूशन. यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड
Mm.
किस डोमेन में काम कर रहे हो, किस चैनल में काम कर रहे हो. आई थिंक देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ विजडम ऑन द इंटरनेट जो यही कह रहा होता है कि यार टू बी ग्रेट एट डिज़ाइन स्टॉप लर्निंग अबाउट डिज़ाइन, right? Which
हाँ,
basically
बिल्कुल,
means आप
बिल्कुल.
social sciences समझो, आप economics
Mm.
समझो, you understand how the world works, you understand how products work, you understand how
I
businesses
think
work, how the
माइकल
mind works, right?
माइकल बेरूत का एक बहुत फेमस आर्टिकल भी है इन हिज बुक, तो ही टॉक्स अबाउट दैट कि लाइक टू
नहीं,
लर्न
I'm
अबाउट
pretty sure.
डिजाइन लर्न
ये
अ
मैं कह रहा हूँ ना कि there अब मसला पता है क्या मसला ये है, that there is an infinite, almost an infinite repository of resources. People
ट्रू.
for some reason choose to overlook that, and
हाँ.
that is something which I feel is the biggest slip, in my opinion.
Mm.
So you start with that. आप जो existing resources हैं उनको तो consume करें. And I think
बिल्कुल.
from my own experience right now, whoever I know who is categorically like top talent or top 1% or really good in whatever
Mm.
they're doing, junior or mid level or whoever, one thing which separates them is that उन्होंने ना international league पे नजर रखी हुई है. They know कि यार who are the
हाँ,
top
बिल्कुल.
designers, who are the top engineers,
हम्म.
professionals,
हम्म.
entrepreneurs, businessmen, कौन सी fields
हम्म.
successful चल रही हैं, top designers कौन हैं, कौन से designers हैं जो podcast बनाते हैं, क्यों बना रहे हैं, what
हम्म.
is their
हम्म.
motivation. ये भी तो चीज़
हम्म,
है ना सीखने की।
बिल्कुल।
आपको अगर
बिल्कुल।
डिज़ाइन के ही लेट्स से आप टिपिकली आपको सिर्फ डिज़ाइन में रहना है और आपको बाकी
हम्म।
चीज़ें नहीं करनी, डिज़ाइन के अंदर
हम्म।
भी तो ये सारी चीज़ें कर सकता है ना, ये तो मालूम कर लें। So I think a lot
बिल्कुल।
of it is just being proactive about a lot of these things which you can learn about. And I think if
हम्म।
and this is like almost a guarantee of sorts. If you can reflect your mindset to the interviewer, you will get
हम्म।
through. Your because आपके काम के अंदर reflect हो रहा होगा और आपके जवाब के अंदर reflect हो रहा होगा. And
हम्म।
there is absolutely I think ये थोड़ा वो भी लगता है ये paradox भी है because design is still very much in demand. राइट?
हम्म।
हमें लग रहा है कि वो जॉब्स रिड्यूस हुई हैं, फलाना है, हालात
हम्म।
ख़राब हैं वगैरह, बट डिज़ाइन इज़ स्टिल वेरी मच इन डिमांड। प्रॉब्लम
हम्म।
सिर्फ ये है दैट एक्सपेक्टेड expectations from what the designer should do is increasing
हम्म।
and is rightfully
यस।
increasing as well. Because if
हम्म।
the theme is that I need to have if I was supposedly just supposed to have, let's say, five smart people, now I will just have three smart people, right? But that still
हाँ,
means
बिल्कुल।
that there is still this room for three smart people, right? So eventually,
आई
it's
थिंक
about understanding which will unlock this next opportunity for me.
बिल्कुल, नहीं आई थिंक यहाँ आपका वो जो पॉइंट लाइक जो पहले आपने कहा है वो बहुत ज़्यादा रेज़ोनेट करता है अबाउट नॉट बीइंग टू प्रीशियस अबाउट लाइक व्हाट यू आर डूइंग इन दैट सर्टेन रोल जो आपको जॉब है। क्योंकि आई नो फ्रॉम माय ओन एक्सपीरियंस कि शुरू के अंदर बहुत होता था कि अगर लाइक एट सम पॉइंट इट बिकम्स कि अगर कॉपी भी लिखनी है तो वो होता है कि नहीं जी ये यूएक्स कॉपी के लिए भी एक्सेप्टेड बंदा हो तो यू डोंट थिंक अबाउट दैट बिकॉज़ लाइक इट्स नॉट पार्ट ऑफ द डिज़ाइन जॉब कि मैं
Yes.
कंटेंट के बारे में क्यों सोचूँगा बट लाइक दैट्स पार्ट ऑफ योर जॉब एंड दैट्स हाउ यू ग्रो। या इवन बीच
Yes.
में आई रिमेंबर कि व्हेन आई स्विच्ड कंप्लीटली लाइक व्हेन आई वाज ट्राइंग टू स्विच कंप्लीटली टू यूआई यूएक्स डिजाइन माय बैकग्राउंड इज फ्रॉम विजुअल डिजाइन तो आई वाज लाइक कि मैं विजुअल डिजाइन में ब्रांडिंग तो करूंगा ही नहीं भाई मैं लाइक आई एम अ यूआई यूएक्स डिजाइनर मैं ब्रांडिंग को नहीं हाथ लगाऊंगा बट लाइक दैट्स पार्ट ऑफ द प्रोसेस आपको कहीं ना कहीं वो इन्वॉल्व करना होना पड़ता है टू
हाँ, सॉरी इस पे भाई
यस।
एक और इम्पोर्टेंट पॉइंट इस पे ऐड करना चाहता हूँ बिकॉज यू यू एब्सोल्युटली आर स्पॉट ऑन कि आपकी जो स्ट्रेंथ है
हम्म।
ना यू यू हैव टू लेवरेज दैट। आप जो
हम्म।
आपकी स्ट्रेंथ है ना उसको आप छुपा नहीं सकते, यू कैन नॉट फॉरगेट दैट बिकॉज उस स्ट्रेंथ के जरिए ना आप अपनी लेवरेज एक्चुअली बना सकते हो। तो अगर आपकी विजुअल
हाँ,
बिकॉज आई
बिल्कुल।
थिंक रियलिटी यही है, आइदर यू आर कमिंग फ्रॉम लाइक टू फॉर द मेजोरिटी ऑफ अस वी आर आइदर कमिंग फ्रॉम अ
हम्म।
सीएस बैकग्राउंड या we're coming from
हम्म।
a visual design background. There is
यस।
very like majority के अलावा फिर और कुछ हो सकता है बट मेजोरिटी यही है।
हम्म।
अब अगर हम
यस।
विजुअल डिज़ाइन के बैकग्राउंड से आ रहे हैं इंक्लूडिंग माई सेल्फ, मैं तो खैर विजुअल डिज़ाइन भी इट्स अ कपल ऑफ कोर्सेज, इट्स नॉट अ डिज़ाइन प्रोग्राम,
हम्म।
राइट? सो इवन फ्रॉम माई साइड व्हाट आई नो इज के जो हमारे टच पॉइंट्स बने हैं हमारे नॉन डिज़ाइन स्टेक
हम्म।
होल्डर्स के, वो बने डिज़ाइन पे
हम्म।
ही हैं। So, वो आपके डिज़ाइन के काम के ऊपर ही आपकी फर्स्ट
हम्म।
कॉन्वर्स होनी है। So if
एग्जैक्टली।
you shy away from these things, you're actually missing out on opportunity where you can reflect
हम्म।
on आप सोचते कैसे हो, आप उसको बता ही नहीं सकोगे बिकॉज आप उसको या तो
हाँ,
वर्बली
एग्जैक्टली।
बता रहे थे लेकिन आपके पास जो ऑप्शन आया था जो आपका क्राफ्ट है वो क्राफ्ट रिफ्लेक्ट तो करो ताकि उसे भरोसा हो
हम्म।
कि यार अच्छा इसको क्राफ्ट अच्छा आता है तो इसके पास कोई दिमाग में अच्छे पॉइंटर्स भी होंगे या इसका रैशनल होगा,
हम्म।
एटलीस्ट मैं सुन तो लेता हूँ बिकॉज इवेंचुअली वो मेरा काम भी करके दे रहा है और वो
हम्म।
काम से मना भी नहीं कर रहा, बट एट द सेम टाइम वो और बल्कि मेहनत कर रहा है टू इंश्योर दैट आई एम able to give a better result as well. So it sort
हम्म।
of is a win-win because they see that you're putting in extra work for them and you're also getting a chance to reflect your perspective onto the other
ट्रू।
stakeholder.
ट्रू। डेफिनेटली। Okay, so let's have some quick questions. तो sort of a rapid round. You can think about it,
Oh,
but like I'll prefer कि ज़रा जल्दी जल्दी बताएंगे तो अच्छा है.
मैं लैग तो
Who's
ऊपर
your
डालूं।
favorite? So who's your favorite designer? Or maybe you can tell me about your favorite designer or your favorite design company and why.
यार आई थिंक राइट नाउ इट हैज टू दोनों के अंदर भी तो ब्रायन चेस्की चल रहा है और इसकी प्राइमरी वजह
हाँ,
ये है
nice.
दैट he's been able to like personally what I really look up to is that he's been able to articulate the non-designer side of things from a designer's lens.
Hmm.
तो जब इसकी
Hmm.
इसकी लैनी के साथ जो पॉडकास्ट भी थी, if I 100% recommend everyone listens to it, he
Yeah.
will not talk about design at all, but you would
Hmm.
resonate from his perspective कि यार अच्छे डिज़ाइनर की ही बात कर रहा है where it is our concerns which we're trying to voice out, but he's been doing it
Hmm.
from his perspective. So even though
True.
technically he's no longer a designer, but he still
Hmm.
is pretty much practicing whatever the end goal of design is supposed to be, which is to look after the end user experience. And then he shares a lot of what he does or at an org level with everyone.
Hmm.
So I think what sets it apart is that because even with a lot of these turbulent situations, the design quality has not dropped, right?
Hmm.
And I think,
Yes. Yes.
and
That's true.
because startups के अंदर the nature is very complex for
Hmm.
something like Airbnb, given the amount of different types of stakeholders, they've still been
Hmm.
able to sort of keep it really really simple when it comes to the core experience, which I think again
Yes.
it's as many conversations which we have on designer having a seat at the table wali cheese, it's not an easy one
Hmm.
to really really pull off. So
That's true.
I would I think it also changes ऐसा नहीं है कि there is this one ideal, because I think it keeps on reflecting. So इससे पहले
Hmm.
at some point it was Julie Zhu, because I was reading
Ah.
her book Making of a Manager.
Yes.
उससे पहले there were a couple of people from Spotify, कभी Shopify. So it keeps on changing very honestly. Like there are a
Hmm.
lot of people on design Twitter who I've just signed up on, तो उनकी कोई भी चीज़ आ
Yes.
रही होती है, so I wouldn't say there is a favorite, but there are a
Hmm.
lot of solid people who are worth checking out and
Nice.
keeping an eye
Nice.
on in terms, and it really depends on interest, right? So
Hmm.
आपका जो mindset होगा, if they're able to just resonate with you on this, you would instantly connect.
Hmm. Makes sense. Yeah.
On the
That's
brand
interesting.
design, there has to be Pablo Stanley. So because,
Ah.
purely because of his visual, I think his ability to mix humor or
Hmm.
personality with anything which he does. So वो
Hmm.
AI के design bots or simulations or story generators बना रहा है, but he
Ah.
still
Ah.
uses the witty personality which he has. तो इतना एक
Exactly.
hard technical topic को he's been able to approach it
Ah.
from such a fun and engaging way to sort of interact with those things. So yeah,
Also, the
these
fun
are
thing
like
about
top.
Pablo Stanley is कि मतलब वो he's a designer लेकिन he's building products like whether there's like बहुत simple products हैं
I
like
see,
he's
and
gone
that,
on to
and I think
build
this is
big
also
things.
mutual. This is also the same could also be said about Brian Chesky as well, right?
हाँ हाँ
Um, so I think ये वाली चीज common है, and और शायद ये natural path है. I'm not sure if this is a sure short way, but maybe this is also a hint that this is one of the
hmm.
transitions which are important ones.
Okay,
है.
so next question, your favorite book or like one book that you can you'd recommend to everyone, could be design book, could be related to design or anything.
Yeah, recently I read Grit, or Grit was really good. And so Grit ho gayi, so good they can't ignore you. There are a couple of other books
Hmm.
as well. But any book जिसका core message ये होता है ना कि मेहनत करो और काम करो, that seems to resonate with me, because वो उन
Hmm.
सब का ना synthesis is very much straightforward. कि यार
Hmm.
आप सही मेहनत करनी,
Hmm.
मेहनत का कोई alternate नहीं है. That's number one. नंबर टू, यू हैव टू मेक श्योर कि आप फीडबैक ले रहे हो और फीडबैक से आप इम्प्रूव कर रहे हो. दैट इज़
Hmm.
नंबर टू. और आप हर प्रैक्टिस सेशन के अंदर ना आप एक अपना गोल बना रहे हो. सो वो
Hmm.
डेलिबरेट प्रैक्टिस कहते हैं जिसको, राइट?
बिल्कुल.
These are the three things which a lot of books have given their own terminologies. But the idea is that there is no alternate for hard work, right? And I think I think one analogy which has stuck with me is कि आप 15 किताबें पढ़ लें on how to increase your typing speed. You will not increase your typing speed till you start literally just practicing it, and you practice it in a certain
Hmm.
amount of duration, जब तक आपके हाथ की मसल मेमोरी नहीं बनती, and then you eventually improve your typing speed. So there's that. Books, I mean, I'm not a like avid reader, just to sort of make it
Okay.
very clear. I do read whenever I I really really resonate with the book. But I would love
Okay.
to read way more than what I currently do. ऐसा है.
ओके.
Baki, I think
अच्छा.
for anyone who's looking after building a design team or design organization, build to last and
ओके.
org design for design orgs. ये दोनों
नाइस.
किताबें is I have really helped. एक एक डिजाइन डिजाइन ऑर्ग डिजाइन फॉर डिजाइन ऑर्ग्स इज प्राइमरीली लाइक अ प्लेबुक ऑफ sorts. आपको ये बता देगा ये सारी चीज़ें आपको देखनी है. That's the actionable value.
इंटरेस्टिंग.
And for
ज़बरदस्त.
build to last is basically a compilation of research. और उस रिसर्च के
हम्म.
अंदर वो जो ऑथर्स हैं उन्होंने ये किया है कि हर वो कंपनी विच हैज़ बिन a game changer of sorts, and their criteria of game changer sort of companies has been that they should have existed for at least 75 years. So
ओह.
it is almost a century long study of sorts. And then वो आपको बताएगा
ज़बरदस्त.
कैसे हम लोग ये अभी लिंक्डइन पे जो हम phrases देखते हैं ना, how
हम्म.
common they have been since a century ago, and what are the actual
हाँ.
things to look out for when building teams, when joining teams, and looking out for them. So it's these have been
ज़बरदस्त.
really interesting.
ओके. दैट्स नाइस. So I have some more books to read now. चलें.
Yes. That
Podcast.
infinite backlog है.
Exactly. Never end. Podcast, like something that
There
you
it is. So
listen to
again, I
regularly, like.
haven't I haven't ऐसा कोई भी podcast नहीं है which I've really been super consistent, but one, and that has
Okay.
been Impact Theory. So Tom
Ah.
Bellew hosts it, and the
Mhm.
beauty of the podcast is the structure is basically a 60-minute interview.
Mhm.
The USP or the absolute amazing thing about Tom Bellew is his ability to research. So his perspective is that he will bring on anyone who has really
Mhm.
done a lot of incredible things on the self development fronts. So उसके अंदर
Okay.
आपके पास मेन स्ट्रीम लोग भी होंगे,
Mhm.
but he would also have almost the underdogs or people who you would not know for normal for some of these things. जैसे he
Mhm.
would bring in Tony Hawk जो हमें skating से पता है, but he
Mhm.
has also a lot of other things, right?
Ah.
He would
Interesting.
bring up a lot of these personalities, but I think
Mhm.
the best thing is that he's able to consolidate that research into a set of
Mhm.
curated questions, and I think that has really taught me personally from a user interview perspective or research perspective how
Mhm.
important it is to understand and study the other person, whoever you're about to engage with. And I think
ज़बरदस्त.
that has been very consistent.
Okay. Okay.
Baki, there have been a couple, but I would still just pick one, because
Okay.
it goes across fields. ऐसा नहीं है कि ये सिर्फ tech है या कुछ है. It is
Mhm.
primarily about self. It's primarily on personal development or self development,
Mhm.
and उसके अंदर any sort of speaker comes in with their own flavor. But there are certain themes on self development, but सबकी अपनी अपनी स्टाइल होता है. तो टिम फेरिस आ रहा होगा तो
Nice.
वो टिम
Interesting.
फेरिस अपने स्टाइल में अपना स्टाइल बता रहा है.
Hmm.
साइमन सिनेक आ रहा होगा वो अपने स्टाइल में बता रहा होता है व्हाट वर्कड,
Okay.
एंड सो ऑन एंड सो फोर्थ.
I'll try to listen to that. अच्छा. LinkedIn or Twitter for designers or
यार
like
आई
people
फोर्स
people
माई
in
सेल्फ आई रियली नहीं आई रियली फोर्स माई सेल्फ कि मैं कोई तरीके से एक्टिव हो जाऊँ ट्विटर पे, बट फॉर सम
Hmm.
रीज़न इट हैज़ नेवर क्लिक्ड. लाइक मैंने बहुत
Ah.
वो होता है ना सब्सक्राइब टू दीज 10 डिज़ाइन ट्विटर के ये 100
Hmm.
लोग ये भी कर लिया.
Hmm.
फोर्स माई सेल्फ टू अच्छा ट्वीट करो वो भी कर लिया, या गेट engaged इन communities, या
Hmm.
micro interactions, या sort of
Hmm.
micro conversations karo. So I've tried all of that, but I still haven't been able to find that pull. And I
Okay.
think same for very honestly, relatively LinkedIn is more direct and functional. तो आई थिंक
Hmm.
लिंक्डइन उस हिसाब से वो उस पर्सपेक्टिव से
Hmm.
आप जाते नहीं हो कि आपको नई ऑडियंस को एंगेज करना है. इट्स
हाँ.
बेसिकली दैट लाइक it's not exploration at this point, right, when it comes to LinkedIn.
Hmm.
आई थिंक
True.
लिंक्डइन पे इट्स वेरी क्लियर कि आपका नेटवर्क है वही आपका नेटवर्क है. आगे पीछे
Hmm.
थोड़े बहुत अगर आ भी जाते हैं दैट इज ओके, बट you're not looking for anything to go viral. At least I'm not, right? So from that
Hmm.
perspective,
Hmm.
it has a very straightforward functional thing.
Even though
So yeah.
recently, I guess LinkedIn be has become sort of very crowded and noisy in that sorts case, more about like getting
uh, yeah,
to
yeah.
audience and public.
One
Because
conversation
मेरा
for the other day maybe.
exactly, मतलब my beef with Twitter, not beef exactly, but like I couldn't like use Twitter too much, mainly इसलिए क्योंकि बहुत happening है, like things are happening, like जिंदगी में इतना कुछ हो रहा है पर ट्विटर पे इतना कुछ हो रहा है तो मतलब it's
हाँ.
hard to keep up.
I think it's
So
about
yeah.
threads. So problem there is कि वो चूंकि threads है ना, you end up just consuming so many things within a thread.
Hmm.
कि वो इसने
Yeah.
thread, let's say एक, and again I think what I see over time is वो thread होगा और thread होगा 24 thread वाला एक thread होगा, right? So you end up just
Yeah.
consuming, फिर वो एक thread पे there would be 15 people commenting and sharing
Yeah.
something which might be
Hmm.
useful. बट वो आप एक चीज़ को कंज्यूम करने में ही आप इतना सारा टाइम लगाते हो, वेयर आई थिंक कि
Hmm.
शायद या मैं गलत कर रहा हूँ या वाकई में इसका मकसद ये है, विच आई एम नॉट श्योर इफ
Exactly.
आई रेजोनेट
Exactly.
विद दैट. So
Yeah.
it again, it's very much like reels or any form of social media. You
Hmm.
have to be cautious of consumption. क्या कर रहे हो, किस चीज़ पे कर रहे हो, right?
हाँ बिल्कुल
If it's
बिल्कुल.
not intended or it's intentional, बहुत जल्दी you can just end up spending hours.
Yeah. True. True. अच्छा, last question is, if you were not a designer or if you were not doing what you're doing right now, what would you be doing?
अच्छा सवाल है यार. So
Or maybe
डिजाइनर
let
वाली
let me
चीज़ें
let
तो
me
वैसे.
rephrase it. Let me rephrase it a bit. अगर आप like if you can do anything for the rest of your life, would like what are you going to do? Is it going to be design still? Yeah, something else.
Yeah, I think it would still be very much close. I think यहाँ इस वजह से मुझे थोड़ी तसल्ली भी होती है कि यार अच्छा, I really enjoy whatever I'm doing.
Hmm.
Um, there would be there would be some parts where I think I would love to do some of these things at scale, especially
Hmm.
on the academic front. या ये वाली चीज़ है. I'm still trying to find some way to sort of do that. But basically जो एजुकेशन वाला जो प्रॉब्लम है इन लोकल कॉन्टेक्स्ट, डिज़ाइन के लिए, डिज़ाइन का नहीं भी हो, दैट इज समथिंग विच इज़ लाइक अ relatively relative cause close to me and a couple of people who I'm talking to. So I think this is something जो अगर इसमें कुछ कर सकता हूँ ना, that is something which I would love to do.
Hmm. Okay.
बाकी आई थिंक मतलब वो पायलट शायलट वाली चीज़ें बचपन के होते थे, बट आई नो कि अब ऐसा कोई सीन नहीं है. लाइक
सही राइट.
I do remember saying in some of the essays that I want to become a pilot, but वो बहुत पुरानी बात है. I'm not even sure. Uh,
आई गेस अब अभी पायलट बनेंगे तो यूजिबिलिटी टेस्टिंग चल रही होगी कॉकपिट की कि दिस कुड बी
पायलट
मोर
बनेंगे तो वो,
फंक्शनल.
हाँ एग्जैक्टली, वो डिजाइन ऑफ एवरीडे थिंग्स वाली वो केस स्टडी दिमाग में आ जाएगी. ये हुआ था,
एग्जैक्टली.
इसकी वजह से एक्सीडेंट हुआ था.
ओके ओके. चलें, थैंक यू सो मच अरसलान.
Thank you so much, Raza. I think this has been an interesting first, but looking forward to keeping the conversation going, वैसे तो. And I think to anyone sort of listening to this, remember that the local community is very much active and people are willing
Hmm.
to like help out. And haven't this have wouldn't have happened if, for example, we wouldn't have had this conversation. There has to be someone who reaches out, there has to be someone who responds back.
Hmm.
That is just how a lot of these community things work. So, and when it comes to that, happy to help. And then like looking forward to more of these sessions.
Perfect, perfect. Take care. Okay.